I know we've got people that will be joining us on the call, so welcome everybody that's here. And I know there's a few people coming from LinkedIn Live, so I might not see them, but if you're there in the Ethernet, hello and welcome. We might kick off. So today's about solving one of the biggest HR frustrations, which is having a great idea and then watching it die in the boardroom because the business case didn't land. But by the end of the session, you know exactly how to build a business case that execs can't ignore. So here's how we'll spend the next 30 minutes. These short masterclasses are really short and sharp. First, we're going to talk about why most HR business cases flop and exactly what execs want to see instead. Then we're going to run through the 5 parts of a winning business case and do a live ROI demo so you can see the numbers stack up and walk away. And then you walk away rather with a plug and play template that you'll get after today. And then finally, we'll show you how you can take this a little bit further with an ROI sprint as well. And we'll make sure there's time at the end for some Q&A as well. So in the 30 minutes, we're going to run by a lot, but we're not going to leave you just with theory, but with tools that you can use straight away. So let's get started. I love that we're running on time. We'll start with a quick intro on who we are. So I'm Ryan, I'm the founder of Exsona, and we are a consultancy that helps HR leaders move from people problems to business results. Our job is to help our clients really get out of operational loops. So stuck in operational mode and really move them into getting into delivering strategic value or to support them with that jump. And most of the work that we do is on helping people with challenges like employee attraction, engagement and retention or turnover. And our approach is to focus really on what actually works and build strategies that get executive buy-in because they're both practical and measurable. And I'm also joined by Ivan Pearce, who's the former Australian HR Director of the Year. So welcome, Ivan. Thank you. He's led multi-award-winning people strategies inside some of the country's biggest brands. And today he's going to share how he personally has used business cases to unlock investment for a lot of programs that went on to win recognition nationally and internationally and also deliver real ROI. Together on this call and on this masterclass, our job's quite simple. We want to help you get the green light on the projects that matter to you. And we've not only made this happen ourselves while working in senior HR roles, but we actually make this happen with our clients right now. So we've worked recently with a client in retail. We had an employee turnover problem and they had a solid culture program on the table. However, leadership wasn't buying it. We helped them build a business case with the exact process and the exact templates that we're going to share with you on this call. And we help show the turnover savings and the productivity upside of their culture program. And within the space of 2 weeks, they had the approval, they had the budget signed off, and 6 months later, they were able to measure that they'd actually dropped early turnover by almost 20%. So in this masterclass, we're going to give you our framework for making this happen. But enough about us, we'll get stuck into it. So sadly, the setup of this is that most HR business cases don't make it. In fact, 60% of HR leaders say it's challenging to gather the data they need to justify their proposals. And nearly half of the HR leaders I've spoken to struggle to prove how their initiatives align to the broader business goals. And in our experience, we find that execs aren't rejecting bad HR ideas, they're rejecting weak business cases. And I'm sure everyone has had this happen. You've had a solid idea for fixing a problem or tackling an issue, and you know in your gut that it's the right thing to do, but then it hits the executive table and boom, it gets rejected. And that sucks, because it's not just the idea that gets shot down, it's sometimes our confidence as well. And it's tough to hear a no or a not now or a maybe later when we know in our gut and we know in our head that it would actually make a difference for the people and often for the business as well. And this is a regular cycle in most businesses, and it's the reason why HR leaders feel that their ideas don't get up. But if we don't change how we pitch our ideas, then the cycle is likely to keep crushing us and our people will never see the benefit. We've learned that most HR projects fail not because they're bad ideas, but often because they're not framed in the right way. So they're not spoken or not converted or translated into the language that executives care about. So Ivan's going to tell a bit of a story now about his experience with all this. I'll hand over to you, Ivan.
Thanks, Ryan. And for those I haven't met before, so this story comes from my time at UE Insurance. So I was the Chief People Officer there for a bit under 15 years. So I took it from start-up to 3,000 people and a $1 billion annual turnover business. So for this one, we normally start off with a story where either something went wrong or something went right in our history, and it just helps us to sort of frame what's coming in terms of the strategies and tactics we'll talk about next. But for this one, for context, we go back to about 2013, and it was me trying to get a health and wellbeing program off the ground through the executive team. So for context, at the time, the business was trying to grow very quickly. We were probably about 500 employees at the time. And one of the things that was holding back the growth of the business was the employee turnover was too high. So we were marketing like crazy, lots of leads coming in, but we didn't quite have enough people to convert them in the way we wanted to. So turnover, absenteeism, both too high, and employee engagement was lower than we would have liked it, which was driving that. So I was pitching all sorts of ideas on solutions to the executive team around that time and getting shot down. So the executive team was a bunch of actuaries who are highly qualified math boffins and accountants. So I was the only member of the executive team who wasn't one of those things. And as I was pitching things, I sort of got the same themes over and over again that, the HR fluff idea was too soft, like what was in it for the business in terms of return, maybe too expensive. Every dollar that was spent on people and culture at the time was considered a cost, so money down the drain rather than an investment. Too risky, so they were all very risk averse, as you can imagine. Leading an insurance business, they deal in risk. That's what the business is, and no guarantees that the ideas I was pitching would work. So the barriers, as I sort of thought about why I wasn't getting what I thought I needed, were a bit of lack of alignment. So I wasn't pitching things in a way that aligned with the things that they really cared about as an executive team. And there was a language barrier, so not English versus other, but they wanted to talk in terms of numbers, and I wanted to talk in terms of lovely people and culture speak. So I went away and thought about that because I really wanted to get this health and wellbeing program up and running. I could really see what the benefits would be for our people. But to get there, I needed to pitch it in the business case in a way that was going to make sense to the people who could approve it. So I went for a different tack. So I started by stating the problem in terms of numbers and dollar costs. So did some calculations around what turnover was costing the organisation at the time, and absenteeism. And I think later we're going to show you some tools that can help you to do that. But yeah, so frame the problem that the business is worried about in terms of numbers they understood. And then I'd done quite a bit of research because they were all largely academic backgrounds. What did the research say in terms of what could we expect to happen if we pushed forward with this type of program? What were some numerical outcomes other organisations had achieved by doing it? And then had to be very specific about what it was I was asking for. So in terms of the solution cost, or as I reframed it, the investment, we were looking for one person to run the program and a $50,000 budget to run it. And then what I did was estimate what the impact of that was likely going to be on the things they cared about. So if we were able to move the dial by reducing turnover by, say, 5%, and absenteeism by 1%, I could do the calculations and then show them for the investment they were going to make what was the likely return. And it was multiple times, what they'd be spending. And we also focused on risk mitigation. So how would we make sure through the activities we were planning to run that people wouldn't get injured, or if they were, what sort of insurance covers did we have for ourselves in place that meant they didn't have to stay, awake at night worrying about those risks. So the good news is we got a win. So the program was approved, and in fact, the person who got the job we created was Ryan. So that was his first job in people and culture. Did a fantastic job, and what we did to reinforce this kind of new way of thinking was we tracked the performance very carefully, every participation, and over time we were able to prove through the data the impact of people who are participating on that cohort, their turnover, their engagement and their sick leave, and we were able to prove to the business that people who participated in the program had much lower turnover, sick leave, etc. And so we would, every 6 months, recut that data and reprove to the business, hey, look at how much difference this is making. And over a number of cycles of improving the program, we got to a point where there was an 11 times return on investment. So for every dollar they spent on that program, they get $11 back. And then Ryan went on and won Best Health and Wellbeing Program in the country a few times for that program. But yeah, all through a shift in my mind around language and speaking in the language of numbers was the thing that sort of broke the nexus and got us to move forward with the program. Thanks, Ryan.
Excellent. An amazing story, not just because I'm in it, but obviously, but because it shares a lot. It shares a lot of the value, and then the downside if you don't convert it, then none of that's possible. If you don't convert the language and start speaking into the language that execs care about. And I think I like to think about it in terms of love languages. I'm not sure everybody's heard of love languages, but an executive's love language is ROI. And if you spent enough time working with execs or CEOs or whoever it is in your business that approves your budgets or initiatives, then you usually learn quite quickly that they care about one or all three of those things on the slide. They care about money, risk, and growth. And if your business case doesn't touch one of these, then you'll struggle. But on the other hand, if you touch all three, then you're golden. And most of us in HR talk HR. I think as Ivan says, we talk about the people stuff because it's our day-to-day. And if you're good at your role, then you probably speak it fluently and naturally. And that's awesome. And at work, it's probably your native tongue. But there is that need to become bilingual. And you need to shift, or we need to shift how we speak and how we communicate and how we pitch so that we're speaking the love language of our audience. So I think your job sometimes when coming up with a business case is to be a translator. If you want your CEO or exec or your CFO's attention or the respect and trust, then you need to translate your HR speak into exec speak. And that usually involves converting your metrics or your points or into what they care about. So it could be about turning engagement into productivity, if you can do that, or it's turning turnover, which is a HR word, into dollars lost, or turning well-being into capacity for growth. And that's the shift, or that translation helps take your business case from maybe what's seen as HR noise into like boardroom priority. I think if you translate it into dollars, risk, and growth, suddenly your execs start listening. So the backbone of every strong business case, we break down into 5 parts. And I think Ivan talked through each of these quite clearly, but we kind of break them down when we're creating them from scratch into these 5 areas. And the first is the problem. So you spell it out clearly, and that really is what's happening now. What's it costing us in dollars, risk, or lost growth if we don't fix it? And if you can't make the pain point visible, then execs are unlikely to move or understand why it is that you're pitching something. The second part is the solution. So that's your project or your program or your tech. Say here, keep it sharp and probably don't put long wish lists down, or keep it devoid of HR jargon, and try to paint the picture of what it is that you're proposing, why it works, and why it relates directly to the problem that you've just explained. The third is the ROI. So that this is the kind of the make or break bit. So if you translate your idea into numbers, so savings or productivity gains or reduced turnover costs or absenteeism, as Ivan mentioned, or even just risks avoided, then ROI, again, is the exec love language. If you can make that clear and articulate, then you get the likelihood to have their attention, and they'll follow the story, the problem, the solution, and what we get from it. The fourth is risk. So it's really about what happens if we do nothing. So if burnout continues or turnover spikes, what happens? Do targets get missed? Does the business strategy become at risk? Delivering on the KPIs that the business cares about, is that something that maybe doesn't happen if the problem continues? I think being upfront about risks kind of shows that you've thought the idea through, but also makes your business case stronger, and can also show that you're thinking in terms of not just the people, but the impact that the idea can have on the business and its success. And then finally, I think this one gets missed most often, but the recommendation. So you might have your solution, which is largely what you're asking for, but you might also end with a bit of clarity. So be exact about what you're asking for. What's the investment, as Ivan put it? What's the expected return? And what's the next step? So say, if you're pitching to a room, don't let them guess. Let them know exactly what you're going to do next and what the next few steps are in terms of getting this plan up and going, and make it impossible to say no to. You often get to an idea where you've done the first 4 bits correct, and I've done this myself. I've done the first 4 bits correctly, and then someone has a question on, all right, well, what's going to happen next? And then you have to wait 4 weeks to the next executive meeting to come back and explain how it's going to roll out, and you've kind of lost all that time and momentum. It's really good to be clear on what the recommendation is for what happens next. So I thought it'd be useful if we spent a couple of minutes doing a little bit of this, and we'll first start with translating a HR problem, and this one, employee retention or turnover, into exec speak. And we've got a tool to make this really easy. And if you want to move the needle on turnover, you kind of need to know your number, especially if you're going to translate it into the exec speak. You kind of need a figure that you can take into that room to your execs or to your CEO or CFO, and a number that makes them sit up and pay attention when they hear about what that problem is. So I think I'm going to share our turnover calculator now. So this is something we use and have used in the past, and we've now made public. And I think I see Melita on the call. You told me you'd actually used this, so that's not great. We've got someone on the call that's actually used this in a real scenario, but we use this all the time with every one of our clients. And it's if they're at that problem stage where they're trying to get their executive team to pay attention. This calculator helps you translate employee turnover into a number. So I'll run you through it. It's really easy. You can do it with your own figures, and that's how it works best. But you can punch in your average salary. So, the total annual cost of one employee's salary. Put in your average turnover rate if you know it. So, the percentage of people leaving each year. And then how many employees that you have in total. So we say in this case it's a 400-person business. And then estimate what your total hiring cost and onboarding cost. So how much it costs you to hire someone and bring them into the team and train them and give them equipment, uniform, whatever it is. And then the last one is time to reach full productivity. So you can make an estimation on how much it costs or how much the productivity is lost for when you're bringing someone on and onboarding them. So the average is usually about 3 to 6 months for most roles. So put 3 here. And that kind of translates your results into, well, you get 50 people leaving each year. They're costing you 40 grand a pop. And that translates into $2 million lost per year. And that there is the figure that makes execs scared, which is nice to scare them a little bit if you want the retention, particularly if you've got the solution, which is the next step. Here as well, we've got a little scenario button so you can put in if you were to reduce that turnover figure from, say, 12% to 10.5%, how much you would actually save the business. So you can reduce that further and then give an estimation on the potential ROI, which is useful for your business case. But this is on our website and it's free, so you can use this at any time. And I'd say that these numbers that we're spitting out, aren't a fabrication that's probably happening in your business right now. And we tend to, in these examples, go conservative. It might be a lot worse in your business, depending on what issues that you've got going on and your industry. But the upside is, if you can measure it, you can show improvement later. And that's usually how you get buy-in for every people project that you want to run. Here's how bad things are. here's what we're going to do to change it. If we don't do it, here's the risks, and here's exactly what we're going to do, and how much we're likely to save, or how much we're likely to gain out of this. So if you get your numbers and you own them, that's the first step to kind of changing your story. So here's the part that makes things a little bit easier. Now, you don't have to start with a blank page from here or guess what execs want to see. So we've been through a number of these things over the last, let's speak collectively, Ivan, but 20, 30 years of putting business cases together for HR projects. Saying that collectively because I'm a lot younger than Ivan. I haven't got that much experience relative to himself. But yeah, we've created this template. You get it after today's session. So it's plug and play. So all the sections are laid out, and we've laid them out in plain and English and into exec speak as well. And it forces you just to keep things sharp. So it's not a 20-page deck. It's no corporate waffle. That's what usually those presentations are. It's just the essentials: the problem, the solution, the ROI, the risks, and the recommendation. It's also a simple Word doc. We'll give this to you in. So I've heard people describe it a little bit like me. It doesn't look good, but it works really well. And we've used this exact format with clients to secure funding for projects and recognition and well-being and employer brand and leadership and even HR tech. So it's been tried and it's been tested in the real world. And when you walk into the exec room with this, you're not pitching a nice to have. You're showing a business case that actually speaks the love language of execs. I'll flash it on screen just now. As I mentioned, it's nothing fancy like myself. And yeah, it's just a Word doc. So we can send it's a Google Doc or Word doc. We'll give it to you after this, but it's everything laid out for you, everything that you need to know. And it's all the bits that you need to add in to customize it to your own environment, and some tool tips there as well too, and some links off to some of the things that we discussed. We've even included our methodology in there if you want to borrow our methodology for how we run projects, and that's in there as well, and an example of an implementation plan. So if the execs do answer, well, what's your recommendation, you can show what a phased approach looks like. Yeah, so it's got all the good stuff in there, and so you've got a signature there, so you can ask them to sign it. I'll share in the meeting as well for bonus speed to completion, or speed to execution. But before you get stuck into the business case, there's a few things to note. So these are the common mistakes really that we see, and they're probably all common sense. The first one is to go with a business case that is all heart and no numbers. We've probably been quite clear on that throughout this. The execs don't really have a habit of funding passion projects. Now, they do sometimes, and if they do for you, that's fantastic. But our recommendation is that to lead with numbers and not feelings, because generally it's outcomes that get funded and not passion. Passion is helpful for storytelling. Wouldn't leave it out there, but yeah, numbers get it done. Second is too much jargon. If you're talking about engagement frameworks and culture pathways, you've probably already lost them, or lost at least most of the room. Would suggest keep it plain and in business language. The third one we see is forgetting the risks of doing nothing. If you don't spell out what gets worse by standing still, so turnover costs, burnout, missed targets, then execs won't feel the urgency. And it's very easy for them to say, well, okay, well, let's do that in 6 months, or let's revisit that next time, or let's push that out to next year because things are busy right now. And that's the stuff we hear all the time if you don't have that urgency, which is why act right now. And then finally, asking for approval without clarity on cost versus return. So if they can't see what the investment is and the payoff side by side, then it's a really easy no, because all they'll see is the cost, as Ivan said earlier. So if you avoid these 4 traps, and the business case will help you do that, you're already in the top tier of HR business cases. So the finish line, what we want to help you with is that, this moment that we're aiming for, is that instead of glazed over looks that execs are leaning in, the questions aren't why should we do this anymore, and they're when do we start, and that you walk out with a green light, with budget and with momentum on your side, with a clear plan for action. And the feeling you get is the opposite of deflation. I don't know if you've had a project being approved in that meeting. It's knowing that your idea is alive and it's funded and it's about to get real. And yeah, the feeling is good. It's about momentum and not deflation. So what we've covered today is about how you turn kind of idea or like a picture project into action. and we're offering a free ROI sprint. So if you want to build your case in 30 minutes, so today you've learned the kind of framework for how you do that. If you want to actually put pen to paper, we'll have a chat with you and do that in the chat. So it's like a working session. And what we'll do together is walk through your HR project or idea using the plug and play template that we're going to give you. We'll run the numbers with you on the ROI, please, I can't even speak anymore, ROI calculator that we shared earlier, so that you can show the dollars and not just the sentiment. And then by the end of that 30 minutes, what you'll have is a tailored draft of a business case that you can actually take to your exec team whenever you've got the time with them. So we've set these sessions up to be practical. It's the same approach that we've used with clients who are ready to unlock funding for projects in whatever area they're looking in. So recognition, well-being, leadership, employer traction, whatever it is. And yeah, if you'd like to book in for one of those sessions, grab your phone, scan the QR code on the screen. I'll pause for a little second just to grab my breath back and take a sip of water. I'll give you a chance to do that.
Really encourage people to jump on this opportunity. You might not kind of realise it, but Ryan's won more Australian HR awards than pretty much anyone in the country across all different facets of people and culture stuff. So you'd be amazed how much between us we can get through in half an hour and kind of set you up for success.
I've seen one booking come through, so thank you. Cheers for that. If there's more, that's awesome. Great to see. If you're still thinking about it and I don't have to wait spots, yeah, we can send it to you afterwards as well via a link. What we might do in the interest of time is just open it up and take some questions. So if you've got any questions or feedback, what's landed, what's still fuzzy, any challenges that you're facing right now that you want to talk through, we'll stick around.
We must have made it so simple and clear, Ryan, that we've answered all questions already.
Yes, indeed, must have. Now, if there's any questions, just jump off mute and let us know. Happy to stick around for another 10 minutes if you've got any live ones that you want to run through, or if anything was unclear and you want us to go back to anything we explained earlier, we can do that too. Alrighty.
Cool.
Excellent.
Well, pretty much at time now, so we'll hang in for another 5 if anyone wanted to ask a question but didn't want to do it in front of the group. So yeah, we'll hang on for 5, but for everyone else, as Ryan said, he's got some things he'll send out to you, and yeah, including the turnover